welcome in to another edition of The Run-Up. No Kelly Francis. Work is really getting to Kelly these days. Or she heard our last show and she wants no part of any of this going forward, which is very possible. Kelly, please let us know. We'd love to have you back. Please come back home. Please, 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 please. But we do have Jarrett Smith in the house today. And hopefully technologically improved Jarrett Smith from his last appearance. I said hopefully, all right? And John's always technologically challenged, if I could say the word. It's so bad that I can't even say the word correctly, but we just accept that at this point. There's no changing it. It just is what it is. Yeah. We're getting ready for Atlanta and Columbus tomorrow night, and I want to ask you guys a bunch of questions as we go, and I want to hear from people out there listening and watching on Twitch. This is about questions from you guys, so if you want to know tactics, if you want to know lineup, if you want to know Columbus strengths and weaknesses, whatever you want to get into, we're going to do that here. So the way you can be part of it, you tweet at us at Soccer Down Here, at Longshoe, at Jarrett_Smith, at OSG Nelson. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what questions or comments you have. You can throw your comments in on Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere if you're live with us. You can also email us at soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can let us know what you are thinking about this big match. The match this morning was a good one for Atlanta United. The 1-0 win for NYC means that if Atlanta wins, they will be ahead of New York City in any kind of third place ranking. They have to win. They have to make sure that there's no draw between the Red Bulls and Cincinnati. And you need one of like 11 billion other things to happen. The road is not quite as crazy as you think it might be. The hardest part, and Jarrett, you tell me if you think this is the hardest part. I think it is. It's beating Columbus. Mm-hmm. Right now, yeah, I think that's the expectation at this point. You mentioned that Red Bulls game, and one of the stats as I've been digging into this one that jumped out to me, duels is something that Frank de Boer talks about a lot, and it bears out. When Atlanta wins 50% or higher of the duels in a match under Frank de Boer, they're 18-9-2. When that duel success rate is 57% or higher, they're 8-1-0. That loss was against the Red Bulls. It was a game that you can look at any kind of statistical output you want, and Atlanta was the better team on that day, but they didn't score, and they gave up a goal, and you lose. That's how it goes. On Twitch, Fender X has the question for John. Leading us to our 3-0 win, who will be the man of the match? Well, Jarrett, if Fender X is correct and he's got the really good Magic 8 Ball, who would be the man of the match in a 3-0 win?
Is George Bello coming back in? I think Bello looked good when he had his moments against Red Bulls. He gets the game off that did not really sit well with a lot of people. I think this is a game that, as you're going against the Crew, as much attention as a guy like Pitti and Barco can get, especially Barco, considering, hopefully he doesn't get fouled into oblivion in this game like he did last time they played in Columbus. But I think Barco could be a guy who could be a recipient of some of that free space and some of that gravity that gets freed up in the middle to get out on the outside to either create on his own or to set people up. I think it could be a good game for a George Bello, and I believe Caden started on the Scotsman Caden started on the right side for Columbus last time.
Last time he did.
Yeah, I want to see how they line up against him, but I think this could be a really good opportunity for Bello if Columbus starts trying to clog up that middle and trying to cause problems for a guy like Pitti and a guy like Barco, and you could see Bello get free on the outside.
All right, let's go the reverse, because Christopher Abel and Chucho Zone are not feeling that 3-0 win. They're feeling a 3-0 loss. Who would be the man of the match for Columbus if it is a 3-0 win for the Crew? Jarrett?
It is our Lord and Savior, Gyasi Zardes. Because as Doyle mentioned, Matt Doyle mentioned on Twitter, everyone made fun of Gyasi Zardes' touch for years, and they still do to this day.
They still do.
Because he used he used to have a touch like a sledgehammer. Well, he went and traded that out for a pillow at some point, because Gyasi Zardes has a really it's occasionally inconsistent, but it's a lot smoother than the misses. The misfires are not comical anymore; they're recoverable misfires with his first touch. It used to be his first touch would miss, it'd go 15 feet. Now it goes 3 feet. It's not a perfect settle. It's still recoverable, and he has been lethal. He's been lethal against Atlanta last time they played, which was in Mercedes-Benz Stadium last year, where he just basically puts his laces through a ball and puts a hole in the top corner of the net. I think it's Gyasi Zardes. If Atlanta gets into a situation where they have to start stretching that back line, and Zardes can hurt them both with hold-up play and playing in behind if he needs to.
What about you, John? If the Crew win 3-0, who's their man of the match?
Let me go a step back, because I would think that folks have to get the ball to Gyasi Zardes so Gyasi Zardes can have that kind of a night. I'll go a step back and go with Zelarayan, the other half of ZZ Top. I was trying to look at the three guys that I thought in order of danger, like most dangerous, second and third. I had Zardes as my third most dangerous player for the Crew because of Zelarayan and Nagbe having to get the ball possibly to him so he could have the night that could have that 3-0 Columbus result. So I'll go a step away from my original thought. Since Zardes is my number 3, Zelarayan's my number 2, I'll go with Zelarayan.
I think it's either Zelarayan or one of the wide players, depending on who they play there. Could be Pedro Santos, could be Yunus Mokhtar. If you go back and look at the goals Atlanta's conceded in this tournament, it hasn't been the strikers that have been hurting them. It's been the secondary runners. Velo was playing in the attacking midfield for the Red Bulls. Amaya was playing in the attacking midfield for Cincinnati. They've handled the strikers. Barlow didn't really do anything. Regaton didn't really do anything. I think it's going to be that later runner if Atlanta has problems tomorrow. And I think the way Atlanta wants to play, getting their wide players forward, it's the wide guys. If it's Luis Diaz, if it's Mokhtar, if it's Santos, those are the ones that worry me from the Crew a little bit more.
I'm not sure if Diaz starts, but that's a damn good shout either way, even if you have him coming off the bench.
Yeah.
If it's a tight game and Atlanta starts pushing and they have to push and they're looking to get a goal, and a guy like Diaz can get in, he's shown you what he can do from outside the box. That's a really good shot, actually.
Question from Ropes on Twitch. Who's going to be gassed? A lot of guys on 2 games with 90 minutes played. Who are you worried about being able to finish? If you're late in the match and you need some extra legs, who are you worried about who won't have them?
Go, John.
Oh, thanks. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the back line, and maybe somebody like Escobar. and we've seen in the past where he'll get fatigued, and then he'll make a foul one way or the other that creates a set piece situation. So I'll go to the back, because if you're having to defend against Columbus for an entire 90 minutes, and the way that Escobar likes to get engaged in the play, I'll go with the Joker. As much as I don't like pulling these kinds of names out for these kinds of questions, I'll go with the Joker.
What about you, Jarrett?
I'm going to go Brooks Lennon. Lennon's put in
the one
shifts
I'm
on the
worried
right
about.
side a lot. And I worry about him getting 70 minutes into this game, playing hard, and then not being able, not that he wouldn't track back, just that he can't track back those legs, as Alejandro Moreno said, leaking oil as he's running. And that's what concerns me, especially coming down. Like, I think last time it was Derek Etienne started on the left for Columbus. So, I mean, I do worry about Brooks Lennon giving you everything he's got, and then you going, well, damn, what have we got in the tank? Who do we go to? Do you go to a John Gallagher and ask him to sit in deeper?
Well, you can go. I mean, I'm not worried about Gallagher going. It's just I'm worried about Gallagher having not played with this group in a competitive match. That's the thing, is we've never seen it. I think he has the ability to play at the MLS level. We just haven't seen him do it yet. And this isn't exactly the spot you want players making their debut. You might not have a choice. You might have to do that. Thad Dooley's worried about Lennon as well. Shiva with a good point, and this is something to keep in mind with Columbus. We talked about it on the show this morning. Aloy Room had an injury late in their second match, finished it out. But you wonder about him coming into this. Nagbe came off of the last match. Looked like a strained muscle, according to Shiva. Wonder if he'll start tomorrow. They're through. They're in. Will they manage minutes a little bit differently because of that? They don't have first place in the group sealed. That's not done yet. But will they maybe think a little bit more about resting players if they have to here?
I wonder if they kind of hedge their bets a bit and rest one or two guys, maybe three at the most, and just kind of see what they can get out of against an Atlanta team that I think you have to look at Atlanta like a wild card. Like, Atlanta's talented, but after those two performances, what are you expecting if you're Columbus? I think if you can go into this and rest some guys, because I believe they would play Saturday or Sunday, I think. You want to maximize as much rest as you can get in, the energy sapping weather that is Orlando. Even during the day when you're training, that's just, you're not getting to maximum recovery that you might be getting, back in Atlanta, back in Columbus, where you have world-class facilities. I could see them resting a guy or two, and then if things get kind of dire, deciding, okay, we need to go, and we need to pull these guys on. And pull them off the bench, put them in the game, and make sure that we're in good shape so that you do have first place in the group if you're Columbus. So you're not in a situation where you're having to play a tougher opponent in the next round, because that does matter and stuff like this. Because now it's a one-off going forward. It's not just a group stage of, we'll play whoever we want. No, you want the matchup that's going to fit you. You want the team that's finishing third place. You don't want to face someone coming in hot.
Yeah, and that's the tough balance for Columbus is, do you have to rest guys to be in a better spot for the knockout round, or are you more worried about we roll everybody out, and if somebody has to come off, we just slot somebody else in, and that's it? I don't know. I don't know where Caleb Porter is with his group yet.
And the counterbalance to that, to me personally, is that let's say you rest guys. Let's say things don't really go well, and you start bringing them on. Mm-hmm. We saw this with a couple of teams already in this tournament, like Toronto when they were up on DC. When that engine's not turned on in the middle of the game, and you click the key, it doesn't always turn on. Yep. You could end up burning guys energy-wise and getting nothing out of it. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, Christopher Abel needs a little bit of sunshine, I think.
All right, so let me get my pump here. Let me find my pump.
I think that's my job, but Chris says this. Knowing our luck, Nagbe will get a hat trick. Bello will be sent off on a controversial VAR decision in the 5th minute. I really hope I'm wrong. What puzzles me is that Columbus and Atlanta play similar styles. Absolutely true. Both like to control the ball and carry the play, but their results are quite different. Columbus ran Cincy off the field, and Atlanta lost. Columbus dominated Red Bulls and won by 2.
Radically different.
Yeah.
What's up?
Since you will approach both of those games night and day.
We'll get there in a second. Columbus dominated Red Bulls and won by 2. Atlanta couldn't get a result. What has Columbus done better than Atlanta in these 2 matches? Score. I don't want to simplify it to that, but that's it. Because go back and look at the beginning of that Cincinnati game. Cincinnati and Columbus. Cincinnati did not sit back. They did not put 10 guys behind the ball. Cincinnati and Columbus were even up until the Lucas Zelarayan free kick. And then they fell apart. Yep. They have no confidence. Jaap Stam talked about it, and that's probably why they came into the Atlanta match and played the way that they did. He was worried about his team's confidence because they looked shell-shocked after that. They gave up another goal quickly, and it just all fell apart. It looked mental for Cincinnati. They came into the Columbus match and the Atlanta match with completely different game plans. That's one thing. Red Bulls, Columbus took advantage and didn't give up anything. They didn't give up a shot on goal. It's not like Red Bulls had a ton of shots on goal against Atlanta, but they didn't give up a shot on goal, and they got a goal. The Red Bulls are not a team that is a come-from-behind team, in my opinion. I think they have to get a lead, and then they have to pick their spots in pressing. And I really do want to see Chris Armas this year if he's adapted it a bit to be less press reliant and maybe a little more trap where you can do it and figure out your spots a little bit more to conserve guys, because he's going to have to. But both teams played Atlanta differently than they played Columbus. And that's a big thing that I don't think people are talking about in this tournament. And I don't know, maybe I'm making excuses again. But when you look at the way that, we talked about this on the morning show, John, when you look at the way that Houston and the LA Galaxy played against LAFC and their approach defensively, and you compare it to especially what Cincinnati did. The Red Bulls are a defense-first team, we know that. But if you compare what Houston and the Galaxy did to what Cincinnati did against Atlanta, and especially after they went down to 10, it's night and day. And when teams don't sit back and pack the defensive half against you, good attacking teams can score goals. Atlanta is getting so much respect that they're not able to break teams down, and they've got to find a way to do that.
Against Red Bulls, I mean, if you look at it from a Red Bulls perspective, I think that obviously could not have gone any better for them. You get a goal in the 4th minute. You're not a team necessarily that is good at coming from behind the way that you're structured and the way that your game plans are with Chris Armas. So you get the big lead. You can defend, you can do your game, and you can put your will and your game plan on the opponent. With Cincinnati and Atlanta, Cincinnati, to me, basically, and like I said, it just reminds me of that Simpsons gif that we see about Simpsons in soccer, where it's just kicking the ball into that quad, and it just goes back and forth, and it's the most boring thing that you've seen. There were moments, and Jarrett and I were talking about it, where Cincinnati basically was just like, here, go fetch. I mean, they were, it was Mean Girls, and Gretchen was involved. It's like, trying to make fetch a thing, and it's just like, you go get it, and...
I don't think that's how that analogy works, John.
Well, just they were making fetch happen. It's like, here's the stick.
Let it change it. Do something else.
Fine. Here's the stick.
Jared ran away because of that one. It's so bad.
Like, fine, you've got it. Fine, you've got your favorite lab that likes to chase sticks in the lake, and it's like, all right, there goes the stick in the lake. You go get it, bring it back to shore. That's what Cincinnati was doing at moments against Atlanta. It's just like, you go get it and bring it back. We're going to stand here and we're cool. And they did that the entire time, and it was the most negative thing, short of a subtraction problem in algebra, that I have seen in soccer since probably what, Pablo Mastroeni? Jarrett, is that a safe negative assumption?
I mean, I've got more recent ones than that because I watch a lot of Scottish games.
Yeah.
And I've watched a lot of, like, I don't want to say Hamilton Academical because they actually tried to play sometimes. It's like, Falkirk playing Rangers in a cup game, that sort of thing.
So we've got John going to Mean Girls making analogies, and you're going to the Scottish Premiership, and people watching and listening are like, what, really? This is what this show's turned into? Bring back Kelly, please.
Yeah, really?
Well, I mean, you want to talk about teams that sit back and don't make it fun, that's what you get.
Well, that part is accurate.
Yeah.
But there's a good conversation going on Twitch, and I want to bring this up. Bernd Dursberger says sit and counter against Atlanta works. So Atlanta has to improve its transition defense in order to make teams take a different approach. While Chara says so does the press and getting them in transition. So y'all are both kind of on the same boat, but looking at it from different perspectives. And Thad Dooley is questioning this, so we're all trying to figure this out. Sit and counter definitely works. That's an absolute. Atlanta hasn't given up a ton of chances in this tournament. That's one thing that does need to be understood. So, Bernd, I would push back a little bit on improving transition defense as a whole, because as a whole, I think it's been pretty good. You've only conceded twice, but both of them were in transition. Now, I think the tricky thing, the press, and this is where I'll push back on Walchara just a little bit, the Red Bulls press was the least effective press they've ever had against Atlanta. When you go back and you look at the chances created, the passing percentages, where the passes were coming from, where the Red Bulls were setting their line of confrontation, the press didn't really do anything. As the night went on, they just sat deeper and deeper, and it looked a little bit more like Cincinnati than it did a typical Red Bulls game. So the press wasn't the concern. The thing, then, go back to what Shiva said at the beginning of this. I said it, and it's, try not to oversimplify things. You talk about Atlanta and Columbus. What's different? Atlanta does not have Joseph Martinez, and Columbus has Gyasi Zardes. Mm-hmm. So goals change games. And where goals happen in games, they change matches. And it's like, duh, well, that's how you decide who wins, but they change the way teams play. The Red Bulls get that goal early. They don't have to press as much. They can sit a little bit more and pick their spots. As the game went on, they did less and less. Cincinnati came in, I think, terrified after what happened to them against Columbus. So they sat. Atlanta goes 10. They still sat. Atlanta still created chances. And then as the day went on and Atlanta got more tired playing with 10, then Cincinnati started to venture out a little bit more. It's tough. It's tough. Burns says that I think Atlanta can play through the press, and I agree. Atlanta did struggle with counters from the Red Bulls in the first half, but we're talking 4 shots on goal. You're going to take that trade-off if you are getting production in the final third. Because your bet, the bet that Frank DeBoer makes with the way he sets his team up and the way they're set to play, is that we will dominate possession, we will dominate chances, and because of that, we will score more goals than you do. That's it. You know you're going to concede chances because you're going to be aggressive and get numbers forward. But you have to convert. If you can't, then you have to change everything. Because dominating the possession and getting numbers forward, if you're not scoring anything, it's actually creating more risk in those counter situations. And that's the scary thing, is you've got to have somebody be a goal-scoring threat.
Well, and I mean, when we were going over this in the morning show and trying to figure out, we pretty much had 9 of the 11 guys figured out, and it was down to 3 for 2 in the midfield. And if you're looking for, and it just comes down to that idea of possession for me and how you want to attack things and who those two are. Is it Remedi and Jeff, where Jeff is your more defensive guy who helps out working your way backwards, knowing that you're going to need that human roadblock in the middle of the pitch to keep Columbus from coming, and Remedi is the guy who ventures forward? Is it Hyndman who's your offensive element?
I think you're maybe I'm wrong. I think you're focusing on the wrong part of the field.
Okay.
I don't think that's the issue. I think, and we talked about it a little bit in the Atlanta United 2 match. I'm trying to think where else it came up recently in my mind. Take this morning with Miami and New York City. This is a prime example of it. So New York City gets the goal. Miami needs a goal to get anything out of the game. They're going to throw more and more numbers forward, right? They have to. They know they're going to give up chances. You're making that trade-off. That's the trade-off that Frank DeBoer makes minute 1. That's the foundation on the way Atlanta wants to play. It's the same trade-off that Pep Guardiola makes. It's the same trade-off that any kind of ball-dominant team makes. They decide that we're going to have the ball, we're going to create the chances, we're going to trade off giving up some chances in transition because we're going to have more numbers forward. Okay. Miami, New York City is a prime example of that because Miami has to go get a goal. They have to throw numbers forward. If you don't finish the play, and maybe I'm mixing up my sports metaphors here, but when I say finish the play in that kind of situation, if you get all the numbers forward, you get into the final third, and you don't get a shot on goal, even a shot on goal can be risky for transition, but it's going to take the goalkeeper a minute to pick out that transition opportunity. You have to get the shot on goal. You have to get the shot that goes out for a goal kick. You can't have the turnover, because if you have the turnover, you're exposed, your numbers are up, and they're going the other way before you can transition. You have to finish plays off. You have to be very careful about that, and it's something that at times in this tournament, not overwhelmingly, but enough when you have 0 goals, you're getting hurt in those transition moments because you're not finishing these plays. That goal against Red Bulls, prime example. You had the ball in the corner, and the Red Bulls worked out of it, played up the line. Escobar goes for a tackle. It pops up in the air right to Barlow, and you're exposed. You're caught.
Yep.
Because you didn't finish the play. It didn't go out. It didn't go out for a throw. It didn't go out for a goal kick. It didn't go to the goalkeeper's hands. Those are the things that Atlanta's got to do. And in terms of doing that effectively, I think maybe it would have been different if you played 11v11. And Jared, I want to get your take on this. Adam John, we saw him start, only play 26 minutes until the red card. Does that change Atlanta's attack enough for you?
I mean, I want to see Adam John out there against Columbus, honestly, and it's not a shot against a guy like Manuel Castro or any other strikers out there. I just like having that Tower of Orthanc that you can kind of anchor your offense around. It doesn't have to be a guy where you're just pumping crosses into the middle like he's Alan Gordon trying to find his head one magical time. It can be during a hold-up play. It can be a guy who's, trying to pull center backs out, trying to create a bit of physicality. Maybe a guy who draws a foul because of his size, in a really good area for a set piece. But I want to see what he does with 90 minutes. I mean, I wanted to see it against Cincinnati. I think 90 minutes against Cincinnati, Atlanta's winning that game is 9.9 times out of 10.
I agree.
If there's 11 guys on the field.
Yeah.
And it sucks it happened the way it happened, but it did. Nothing you can really do about it now. You can try and pick it apart, but again, someone went off before the first hydration break. I don't know what you can take out of a game in which a team played with 10 guys on the field against 11, and the team with 11 guys played behind the ball on their side of the field, didn't come out of their side of the field until the last damn hydration break for more than a minute. I mean, I don't know what you can take away from that. I don't know what you want to take away from that. I mean, you can take anything away from anything if you're trying hard enough to find exactly what you want to take out of it. But I mean, I don't know what you want to take out of that. I couldn't take anything out of it just because of the situation, and it sucked. It was a bad situation. It's cliche to say, but I guess no one felt worse than Jake Mulroney, who gets sent off. But stuff like that happens. It's a game you thought you had 3 points in the bag, and now you're going to be picking your spots. Now you've got to go get the job done. And I think that can begin in part with Adam John being able to kind of help set that line up top against the center backs and create a bit of space between the back line and, defensive midfield.
Agree?
Yeah,
Do you think John is the difference maker for Atlanta's attack, John?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, if you think about it from just the notion of what you have with Pity Embarco, speed, artistry, ability, able to put the ball on net, and it's a beautiful thing. I think having Adam John up top gives you that change of pace, gives you that larger presence, the more physical presence, the guy that can go up into the air and challenge for the headers and the duels that we're talking about with Frank that he wants to have won. I think that having a change of pace up there instead of another speedster, I think for me, that's what I'm looking for here, and I think John can do that. And like Jared has been saying, I view the game against Cincinnati as an incomplete. On a grade scale of A through F, I give it an I, because Atlanta had 10 players and your game plan went out the door when Jake Mulroney got that second yellow. So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing what Adam John can do for longer than 26 or 34 minutes, and I think he can be that change of pace up top that you're looking for in this offense.
Christopher Abel with an interesting idea, and I'd be really fascinated to see how this played out. He says, against counterattacking teams, I'd like to see Atlanta just punt the ball to the opposition, sit back and force the opponent to play. Then, when you get a turnover, play it over the top and break the opponent with speed down the flanks. That's not a bad idea. That's when you're playing a team that wants to get numbers behind the ball, you make them have to do something, and you think that they will eventually. Cincinnati, I don't know if they would have. That's kind of an interesting conundrum when you talk about Cincinnati and their approach.
That's honestly what I'm excited about in a really twisted way. Excited to watch Cincinnati and Red Bulls play, because who's going to carry that game?
Yeah,
who's going to carry that play of that game? I'm really kind of curious how that plays out.
I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. But the problem, and this is where it's tough, because when you're a certain kind of club, and I think Atlanta is a certain kind of club, I think big clubs, it's not really accepted for them to play that way. I mean, it's not from, it's not what you're supposed to do. It's not by the book. You're supposed to dominate teams, and you're supposed to outplay them. Big clubs are expected to. I think part of it is the way that you play. You're not supposed to break from your DNA. Pep Guardiola's went through this. When you play teams that just put everybody behind the ball, how do you handle it? You keep getting more numbers forward, and you keep going for it, and you keep on with what you do. It's tough to play against type in this situation, even if it is maybe the smart move tactically. It's tough to change your DNA in a spot like that. That's why Atlanta's always had problems with the Red Bulls. It's a matchup that's difficult. You want the ball. The other team wants you to have the ball, and they want to take those opportunities. Now, we've talked a lot about the first two games, and John, I think you look at this one, Columbus is a team that's not going to play the way the Red Bulls play. They'll press when they have some opportunities to, don't get me wrong, but they're not built on pressing. They want the ball. They're not going to play like Cincinnati did. They're not going to play scared and put everybody behind the ball. They're going to play. That should give Atlanta more opportunities to also play.
Yeah, no, I think it does play into Atlanta's hands when it comes to game state, because you have these first two games and opponents that do things in violently different ways, or they did. And Columbus, they want to get after it. They want to get there, and they want to be active, and they want to work things in transition. They want to get down there and score and have their moments. And I think that when you have a team like that can present you opportunities, if you can create turnovers and then work it in transition to get your own opportunities, I think that by default of the first three matches that we're going to have seen with Atlanta in group stage, I think that you're going to have the most action that you've seen with Atlanta, hopefully, if it's 11v11, that we've seen in this entire group, just because of what the other team wants to do in that tug of war that we're going to see out there.
Jarrett, thoughts?
I mean, I think it'll be a more fun game than you saw last time. More in that line of New York Red Bulls. I'm not saying you're going to go out there and you're going to get the Whitecaps versus Earthquakes game, because we deserve that, but we won't probably get that. But I think you're going to get more action out of this game just because of the way these two teams play. They're going to trade off carrying play. It's going to be I think it's going to be interesting to look at this after the game, where you can look at the chart and see kind of who's tilting the game in their favor, and you can look at the graph as it goes up and down. This will be a fun one to watch, because I think it'll have moments where it's going in either direction, and it's going to be a matter of breaking those moments. And how quickly can you break the other team's momentum, and how quickly can you get it on your side and keep it and be smart with it? It's gonna be fun. And I mean, I guess with everybody being so surprised, and I didn't think Columbus would be this good in the tournament. Did everybody just forget that Caleb Porter's a good coach for a minute there?
Yeah.
I mean, because that kind of feels like what happened.
A lot of people did. A lot of people don't rate him as one of the better coaches. I think what Caleb Porter's done is it's a tough thing to do. We talked about staying true to your DNA. Caleb Porter, when he came into MLS with Portland, he was a very idealistic manager. It was, we're going to play my way. We're always going to play my way. We're going to beat teams playing my way. We're never going to change. And he was up and down. I mean, it's a good year. It's a bad year. It's a good year. It's a bad year. When he won MLS Cup, he learned a little pragmatism. I think being pragmatic has turned into a naughty word in the soccer world. It's seen as being defensive. That's not what pragmatic means. Pragmatic is doing what it takes to get the job done. In a soccer sense, it's doing what that game calls for. Caleb Porter has no problem giving up possession if that's what that game calls for. He has no problem playing vertical if that's what that game calls for. But he's built a team now, especially with Nagbe in it, to be ball reliant, to control possession, and to create chances through their own work on the ball. They've got plan Bs and Cs to work to, and he's shown that he'll do that. Now the question, when you get into that situation, it's a little different. We talked about for a Frank de Boer, for Pep Guardiola, for guys who want to play their way, and that's how they want to play, and they're going to beat you playing their way. It's hard for them to go to a plan B. They struggle with that. Sometimes guys who have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D pick the wrong plan for the game or get away from what's working because they overthink it. We've seen this happen plenty of times with Caleb Porter, with others as well. There's not some magic way to do it, and because if there was, then everybody'd be doing the same things. That's what's so hard about all of this is you're trying to prepare for a match. You are trying to prepare for what you think the opposition's going to do, but you also have to be true to who you are. I think Porter now in Columbus, Jarrett, has the team that is able to truly play the way that he has wanted to play from day one as a professional manager. He's got the players to do it now, and he's going to roll with that.
Yeah, I think so. He's going to have options in what he wants to do. He's got his combination up top. He's got weapons off the bench. He's got weapons out wide. He's got a guy who could sit back as an 8. I'm glad we finally have decided that Darlington Nagbe is an 8, and nobody puts him on the left side on their team sheet anymore.
Caleb Porter did that.
Fake team sheets. I know. Oh,
he had to in Portland, though. That was what he had to do in that team to get the best out of that group.
I mean, but now you're in a situation where you can play him where he has shown that he is the best in the league at what he does. It's a team that is built on. We've got a couple of big price moves. Big price being a comparative word, not like a $20 million move. Bigger price, deep designated player moves. Some shrewd moves within the league, even expensive ones, like getting Gyasi Zardes when everybody else was, still making jokes about Gyasi Zardes, bringing him in, bringing in Diaz from Herediano, who Atlanta had seen, who also scored against Atlanta last year when they played in the Benz, going and getting an Eloy Room. Just smart moves that they didn't break the bank. They stayed within the constructs, and they made moves that fit what he wanted to build, and this might be the year. And if it's not this year, they're not so old that you couldn't be next year as well, potentially, for them. I want to see what it looks like beyond this tournament. How does it look in a tournament setup is one thing. How does it look in a full season? Now, we won't get that answer because this year is going to be so weird. I get it. How does it look in a whole season with this? How many pieces does he have that he can interchange successfully throughout a whole season, throughout a U.S. Open Cup run, balancing with this? Potentially, if they play this well the rest of the way, through CONCACAF Champions League, if that comes up as well.
Shooter McGavin likes your polo shirt, John.
Yeah, well, these are a company issue, and this. I think this was year 1, and we went with the blacks.
It was year 1.
Yeah.
So we got to figure out what we're going to do for year 3. But yes, these.
It's going to be pink and white with flamingos on it.
Oh,
is it flamingos or is it ibises or is it herons?
Oh, it's going to be flamingos.
They're all different.
I'm recognizing teams that won a game this year.
Well, wait a minute now. We got
Tormenta hasn't played yet. That's not fair.
I was going to say we're talking
about
about
the teams that have played.
But ibises are more local to the studio.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
no,
go either way. But to Jarrett's point, and by the way, you can go to the Teespring store at teespring.com/stores/soccer-down-here, and you can get all the SDH gear you want. In the Red Bulls match, to your point, Jarrett, Caleb Porter had 5 new guys in the lineup. Cadden plays 90, Josh Williams plays 90, Etienne plays 90, Sebastian Berhalter's in, and he plays 57. So I think that Porter has the guys that he's becoming more and more comfortable with outside of 11. So he's more than happy to roll 16, 17 guys and have that as a part of that DNA. So you still get the win with 5 new guys in the lineup from your second match to your first. I know that you'll probably end up going back to more of your first match lineup coming out of the blocks for this one. At least I would anticipate that. But to your point, I think Caleb Porter is assembling the roster not just starting 11s with a guy or two, but there's other guys that are there that he can plug in and feel comfortable with, and that's just a continued part of the development of Columbus that we're seeing.
Okay, the big question on the show today was your lineup for the match. What would you go if you're filling out that team sheet? Thad Dooley answered the big question. He went with Brad Gazan, Fernando Meza, Miles Robinson, Franco Escobar, George Bello, Mo Adams, Emerson Heineman, Brooks Lennon, that's the 4, and then Pity Barco and Adam John up top. Jarrett, what's your lineup?
I'm going to be lazy and actually use something similar to that. I think I might actually use that. I think you're going to look at a guy like potentially, depending on how this game goes late in the game, John Gallagher getting to break the seal on his Major League Soccer career. One question I want to have is, if we get Darlington Nagbe for 90 minutes, how does Atlanta deal with him? How does Atlanta, who draws the straw to, because you're not going to man mark across the board. This isn't Matias Almeida. God rest him. God bless his soul. He's not dead, actually. But who do you want to have who can be there? Who can? Because you're not going to. He's almost press proof, and we know this. But to try and minimize his options and make him either work the ball backwards or side to side.
I don't think you have
to that lineup.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to shut him down in that way. I think there's a lot of trepidation about Darlington Nagbe because we saw how good he can be here. But when you look at the way he plays and where his touches are, you're fine with him in build-up. You're fine with him in his defensive half. You're honestly fine with him in the middle third. You don't want him playing the ball into the final third. You have to watch out for those. I mean, he doesn't pick up a ton of assists, but he picks up the ball that sets up the assist, and you want to break that up. So for me, it's not even so much like one player shutting him down or marking him. It's about forcing everything from him wide. You don't want him with the through ball. You want him to have to play out wide every time or backwards. You don't want to make it easy for him, and it's almost like you're more worried about what his passing options are as opposed to him. You want him to have to make that decision to try to carry it forward and do something himself. He's reluctant to. That's not his game. So you want to make him have to do that. Take away his options or make him play it out wide where he can hurt you less.
Darlington Nagbe heat map is the most accurate thing ever made on the internet.
Yeah, he doesn't want to drive into the 18. When he does, he can be effective, but it's just not the way he plays. It's not where his game is. So, okay, you know how he's going to play, so play into that a little bit. Just make him force it out wide. Make him connect passes, but passes that don't hurt you.
But otherwise, I like that lineup. I like the idea of Mo Adams and Emerson Heineman back there. You just got to make sure communication is right, but Mo Adams isn't a guy who you're going to expect to get forward, like, say, Eric Remedi, if you're playing him in that kind of role. I mean, you expect Remedi to have that ability to get forward because he can, even though he played in front of, the back line when he was at Bonfield. Mm-hmm. He has that propensity to be that kind of 6'8". But I like the idea of Mo Adams sitting there and Emerson Heineman having the ability to connect it. But again, you have an expanded roster. You have an expanded game day roster. You have expanded subs. So if something's not working in the middle part of this game, you've got more options to go to. And I think that does, and we've seen it in this tournament, that does present itself for, flipping a game on its head completely.
Yep, it's true. John, what would your lineup be for tomorrow?
I think that across the board, 9 of the 11 we're pretty much all in agreement with. Instead of Mo Adams and Emerson Heineman, Thad Dooley went with those two in the middle as well. I went with Remedi and Jeff and everyone else that we've discussed. Brad, Mesa, Miles, Escobar, Bello, Brooks, Pity Barco, and Adam John. I've got Remedi and Jeff. Remedi being the more offensive-minded, and Jeff being the one who gives Darlington Nagbe the early reminder of what he left.
Could be. I like that pairing. That's the way I would go with it, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. Lots of comments on Twitch. I want to try to catch everybody before we wrap up. We've got about 10, 15 more minutes.
Darlington Nagbe is basically a great scat bat, though. When you try and tackle him, he's like a Kansas State version of Darren Sproles. You can't get a solid hit on him. Oh,
yeah, but you want him to go east-west.
It was a glancing blow. Yeah, absolutely. I'm saying, but he's talking about putting a hit on Darling, getting a tackle in on Nagbe. It's hard to get a clean shot on Nagbe. He's like a little scat back. You can get a glancing low, but it's hard to just really kind of get into a tackle on him.
Well, you do
He's
it off
just
the ball.
so light on his feet.
You catch him with an elbow off the ball. You catch him with an elbow on a set piece.
Jesus.
Oh.
That's the game. Hey, you can not like it. You can feel bad about it. You want to win.
Just a reminder.
No, I get it. Just like
That's part of the game. Like it or not.
Just like Juan Agudelo going full Jaworski Lane today.
That's dumb. If you're going to do something, you got to be smart about it. If you're going to take a shot at somebody, you got to do it where you might not get seen. Now, it's harder to do that with VAR involved, and J.J. Williams failed at that in his situation, but you want to do those things if you have to do those things. Depends on how the referee is going to call it, and this is a weird one with the second time in this tournament where you're getting a referee who was the fourth official for your previous game. I despise that. Because when you have referees, part of the crew, who worked the game before, doesn't always happen, but there can be these moments where you're having flashbacks to being yelled at by that manager, by that bench, by a specific player, and you're working the next game for that team. It's not ideal. I'm blown away that that's happening here. It's the second time. Rivas was the fourth official for the Red Bulls match. He was in the middle for Cincinnati. Timothy Ford is the center for this game. He was the fourth official for Atlanta and Cincinnati. This is his first work on the field. He was in that second tier of referees. Last year he worked 13 games. Like your top guys will work almost every week. Alan Chapman worked 27 games, for example. Ford worked 13. Pretty average in terms of fouls per match. He only called one penalty in those 13 games. That's a little lower than normal. A little bit higher than average on yellow cards. 2 reds in 13 matches is average. Now, here's the other element you got to remember. The VAR, David Gantar. Gantar worked the Sporting Kansas City, Colorado game with reds, multiple. Some weird things happened in that one. Gantar worked 16 matches last year on the field. Don't have his numbers as a VAR. On the field, he worked 16 matches. 10 red cards in 16 matches. Alan Chapman gave 10 in 27 matches. Those are the two who gave the most red cards last year. So you have a VAR who is prone to the red card in the situation. Keep that in mind. If something happens off the ball, he has no problem recommending a red card. I just don't like the fact that you have the fourth official from the previous game that had some contentious moments now taking the whistle for this game. I'm not a fan of that at all. I'm very surprised that it's happening for the second time to Atlanta in this tournament. Let's get into Twitch because we got a lot of things here before we wrap up. Lunatic, who might be a newbie this time around. Looney says, it's going to take time for Atlanta to figure out how to finish chances. It's not like the ball wasn't on Bello, Castro, or Pitty's foot in front of net during the games. Good thing is that Atlanta isn't getting blown out. You have to develop chemistry in the attack, and the wins will come. Very measured, calm comment from Lunatic. It's Lunatic, so I thought it would be crazy. Not at all. Not at all. I like it. I like it. Byrne, when talking about those transition moments, Byrne said, so we need tactical fouls to break up the counter and better coordinated defensive line when defending in space or a high line. They're definitely going to defend with a high line. They need those tactical fouls. The problem that Atlanta runs into at times with tactical fouls is they get called as they should. It's a tactical foul. A lot of times you see a yellow card. That's not happening in the other way. And that's where Atlanta starts to run hot because they're getting punished for those tactical fouls with yellows. It's not happening the other way. You start getting mad, and it goes all downhill. But, yeah, tactical fouls, any possession team has to know how to use them. And it was always a criticism of Guardiola's Barcelona and his Bayern and his Manchester City teams. I think that's been an ongoing conversation with Manchester City about those tactical fouls. Yeah, it's part of the game. If you're going to be a possession team and you're committing numbers forward, you can't get beat in transition. Got to bring the guy down. Jared, I don't know if you remember this, but I think we talked about it. RSL last year, where it's 1-1 late, and RSL has the ball in the middle third. Frank is screaming for a foul in the middle third to break the play up. Doesn't happen. They go down and score.
Jefferson Savarino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have to have those tactical fouls at the right time.
Yeah, just burn the foul. Just take it. And then that is the problem, though, is it going to go both ways? Because with these two teams playing, and I'm really interested to see kind of how the culture develops on the field over 90 minutes. Because we know Atlanta, New York, it's always cantankerous. It's always tense. It's always fighting. It's basically a hammer fight in the closet. But, I always think back to when Atlanta would play New York City when Tata was there, and the respect those managers had between each other when Tata was in Atlanta and when Vieira was in New York, where it would get tense, but it never felt vicious. It felt like a lot of mutual respect going either way. Even when there were fouls, it was kind of understood. Do you have that develop in this game? Because I think there is respect on both sides with that. I want to see how that game does develop. Does an early foul kind of tilt the game and start to develop hostility that spills over into the game? Because look, those tempers can flare a lot more. Now, we saw it in the early game, but even 8 o'clock at night, it's still muggy. And I get it. All y'all from the North and from the Midwest and the West who are making jokes about playing in Florida where it's like 80 degrees in the morning and 88% humidity. Yeah, welcome to our lives daily. That's just what we live with. You learn to deal with it. I get it, man. If you're from Canada and you're played for Vancouver your whole life and you're coming down here and having to spend an entire month, welcome to the first circle of hell. This is what we live in, man.
Well, look, you don't have the humidity the same way in Mexico, but Liga MX, the pace of play is slower than other leagues. Why? Because it's freaking hot.
Yes. And in some cases, you're playing higher up elevation-wise. You can't breathe, and not just Azteca.
You might not have the humidity, but you have the lack of being able to breathe, which becomes a huge problem. It does affect games. It does affect styles of play. Christopher Abel and Shooter.
Boil over it all.
Yeah, for sure. Christopher Abel and Shooter with an interesting back and forth, and I want y'all's take on it quickly. Start with you, John. So Christopher Abel was talking about sitting back, giving the ball away. If teams want to sit back against you, just give it to them, play counter, sit and defend. He says he thinks he has the team. He thinks Frank is underutilizing the speed of the wide players. You could sit and counter. Shooter says if everyone played that way, the league would go belly up. Thoughts on that back and forth, John? Quickly.
Sit and defend for me. To me, that just seems like a risky proposition of having to defend more than your DNA would allow, and it might create mental lapses, and you can't afford those. The league would go belly up. I wouldn't necessarily think it would go belly up, but I think that you would have folks who would sit there and see the collective for being what it is, and I think that there would be people who would be just as interested in wanting to change that collective as instantaneously as they saw it, having everybody just not doing anything. There's always going to be that one contrarian that's going to see what they're seeing, and it's going to be like fingernails on a chalkboard and go like, man, I got to change this. I can't watch it. So if everybody did it, it wouldn't last for very long.
Well, if everybody did it, it wouldn't be successful. Beyond the viewing habits, it just, if everybody did the same thing, then you're just punting the ball back and forth. And at some point, somebody's got to take the initiative. Gustavo on Argentine Friends Day. Welcome back, Gustavo. Hopefully that Malbec's flowing for you. Dead on. What Christopher says is what Atletico Madrid uses with Cholo Simeone. They wait, but that's not our soccer style. I don't think we as a fan base will tolerate that in the long run. That's the interesting part, Gustavo. I don't know if we really know what that would be. Think back to last year. We had this conversation a couple times on SDH. What style do you want? Because everybody was critical of Frank de Boer's style. How do you want them to play? What is the style you want? Define it. Honestly, it just came back to winning. Like, that was what it kept coming back to, was winning. I would be very curious to see if you came in and decided, you know what, we're going to sit back and play this way and just counter and see what happens. I think that's what a lesser team does. I think Atlanta's going to have too much talent to play that way. It's not as enjoyable to play in if you are Ezequiel Barco, Pity Martinez. If you're talented with the ball, you want the ball. But if you have a lesser team, can you play that way and get results? We've seen it with Atleti. We've seen it with others throughout history. Would Atlanta as a city, as a soccer city, accept playing in that way, Jared?
Maybe one day. But you know what? It might be, for lack of a better word, similar to when Alabama went from, run of the I formation 40 times a game to when they started spreading the ball around. You win trophies, people don't get nearly as upset about what you're doing when you're winning trophies.
Yeah, bottom line.
Yeah, I think it does come down to trophies. And if you're winning, people will accept it. But I think the leash, and it's been weird with this conversation because I think there's this narrative that Frank DeBoer is boring.
The leash is already short with carrying possession, so I mean...
Yeah, and that's what it shouldn't be. Like, it really feels the reverse. What you would think is it would be the reverse. If you are a possession team and you're playing entertaining soccer and you're committing numbers forward, okay, I'm going to give you more slack for that because I enjoy that more. That's my opinion. I think that's generally how the game goes. The American soccer DNA has never really been defined. There isn't one. The national team doesn't have an identifiable way to play. If you went into Brazil and played in a defensive way, you better win everything or you're gone straight away. Dunga, very quickly, it was like, we don't like this guy. When he's not winning, we don't like this guy because he played a boring style. It's not what Brazil is. In Argentina, okay, you can get away with that a little bit more because the fight is accepted a little bit more there. Brazil, they don't care. They don't want to see that. Different countries have different ways of appreciating the game. In the U.S., you don't have one yet. Yeah, it's never been developed. And in individual cities, it's kind of hit or miss all over the map. I'll be curious over time to see if that would be an accepted way to play.
We've seen a really bad version of that in the United States. We've seen a bad version of that already when Colorado a couple of years ago just ran through the Western Conference and scored like 15 goals in the entire season. It was winning games 1-0 or drawing games 0-0. They gave up like 8 goals all year, but they only scored 15.
But the thing is, if you're a lesser team, okay, that's fine because you're not expected to be winning games. If you are Atlanta, if you're LAFC, if you're, I think, even New York City, certain clubs have a certain expectation of being more ambitious, I think. Yeah. And I would be fascinated to see if, let's
Buddy,
just play fantasy
land. And New York, he's going to want them to play. It's just, is he going to have time? Because he's going to want them to actually play the game.
Sure.
And not just punt it.
No, I know. What I'm saying is I don't think somebody who came in and wanted them to just give the ball away would be accepted for the New York City fan base. I think they're expected to have a certain level of class and play a certain way. Yeah. In Atlanta, I don't know if it's mature enough. If you brought, and I'm not saying it's immature, I'm saying it's just we only had a few years. If you brought Cholo Simeone here, let's say Frank gets hired by Ajax and he goes back to Ajax, things happen and he goes back to Ajax. He leaves. And you hire Cholo Simeone. And he comes in to play a completely different way of playing, and it's very defensive, and it's strictly on the counter. Would Atlanta fans have a problem with that? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know if it wasn't successful straight away, if people would be accepting to give it time or not. I don't know if his reputation would be enough to ride it out. I don't know.
I think that right now with a young fan base and folks who are trying to learn the game, I think that winning right now, as you're developing your genealogy, I think that winning supersedes a lot of that.
It does. I think it's part of it. I think it's a big part of it. It's Shooter with a really good point. Shooter, you are still my favorite on Twitch, Shooter. The real fans would be fine with it, but it would be harder to get new fans.
Yeah.
I agree. Totally. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. What's been wild to watch has been the idea coming from a lot of fans, influencers, what have you, about it's boring under Frank DeBoer and the whole line about I want my old Atlanta United back. And you look at the positional map of the way the team plays under Frank, and yeah, it took him a little bit of time. He had some injuries early, and he had a Pity Martinez who was on fumes at the beginning of last season. Right. But as the year went on, they were more aggressive in getting numbers forward than Tata Martino was. Tata's teams didn't get a ton of people forward on a regular basis. They pressed early on, and that dropped off over time. They were a little more reliant on Miguel Almiron flipping the field, on Joseph Martinez making the run between the center backs, and that was what they did. It's different. It's interesting. And Walchara says, as a new fan, this team is not fun, so I don't know. I wonder if the way they're playing now was producing goals, if Walchara is not the only one, not at all. I wonder if the reaction will be different if the goals are there and the winning is there, playing the exact same way.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I'd like to see. We could go on all night. We're not going to because Nani's running onto the field in Orlando. What's the odds? Orlando, Philadelphia.
0 positive tests, by the way. Last bubble test.
Yep.
So,
keeps happening. What's the odds, John, in this one?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, no, I've got to dial up the odds real quick just before everything kicks.
That's going to take you 5 minutes.
I will.
Philadelphia plus 181, Orlando City plus 136, your draw plus 262.
Philadelphia plus 181 and Orlando's the favorite?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia disrespected again?
Again.
Oh, my goodness. Philadelphia 3-1. They should be insulted. I'm insulted for them.
They should be.
Wow.
Our friends at odds.
Just let me put down a pack of Red Vines on Philadelphia then.
Yeah, I'm in with whatever candy I got, whatever juice boxes I got. I'm all in on Philadelphia here. All right.
No Dwyer for Orlando, by the way.
Yeah, that's not necessarily going to hurt them.
Joe Boss, before we go, says it's good to hear Jarrett back on the airwaves. I'm skeptical but hopeful tomorrow versus Crew. Do we leave the bubble if we lose?
Yeah. I mean, you got to go. Got to go home.
Got home.
Can't stay and hang out. You're done.
You don't got to go home. You can't stay here.
Pretty much.
Chicharito has left the bubble. He is back to Los Angeles after suffering the strained right calf.
All right, we got a show in the morning, John. We can talk about that then. We got to go. They're about to kick off.
Go.
Thanks for hanging out. We will be back in the morning, 9 o'clock. There will be a bit of a watch-along going on because there will be a game going on. We'll be talking Atlanta, Columbus. We'll get you ready for that. And we will have Doug Robertson on in the morning to get his take on everything. Thanks for hanging out with us on the run-up. We'll be back when Atlanta United has another game scheduled. We don't know when that's going to be, but we'll be back with that. We'll be back on SDH in the morning. Have a good night, y'all.
Richard Plotfit.